A new reign is here. A CFF pioneer has returned. Your premier CFF resource. Secure your new reign. College Fantasy Reign. Your CFF reign starts here.
Welcome everyone to the brand new College Fantasy Reign podcast. My name is Joe Arpazi and I started my CFF work in 2008. After stepping away for 8 years, I returned in 2024. You can find all of my content at the brand new collegefantasyreign.com. That is spelled R-E-I-G-N. You can also follow me on YouTube and Spotify for the podcast. And I highly recommend that you follow me on X. My new X handle is at CFR_Joe. And as you can tell, there's a little less purple, not in the room if you're watching on YouTube, but there's a little less purple going on here. I just executed a brand new rebranding here for the website. I wanted to do it before the end of the season, so all of you can get used to what my website and content will be called in 2026. I'm going to be making several changes going into 2026, and this is the first one I wanted to premiere early while we have more eyes out there during the college football season. I wanted to get this out a little early. So the Let Purple Reign brand has officially been retired, and it is now College Fantasy Reign moving forward. And with you guys here, oops, I am trying to move things around my screen and I screwed it up big time, guys. But this is going to be the new name moving forward. And a couple other little announcements here I've been mentioning for a couple of weeks, and I'm going to continue to do this, that week 14 on my website, I am providing all of my content absolutely free of charge. There is not any going to be any paywall. If you're a premium subscriber, free subscriber, or even if you're not a subscriber and you just wanted to check out the new College Fantasy Reign website and the content, you can check out everything that premium subscribers get for free during week 14. And once the season is over, once week 14 is done, I will be putting out a new podcast episode, releasing some more news about some of the 2026 changes that are going to be coming up here. Well, we are still doing the, excuse me guys, we have some new cats, and I don't know if you guys can hear them in the background, but they are crying outside of the door. We are still doing the 2025 Battle for the Belt 52-man league challenge. And what this league was is I had myself and 3 special contestants, which were Eric Froton, Jared Palmgren, and John McKechnie, all join in. And 48 lucky premium subscribers won golden tickets to make it into the show here. We just finished up the divisional playoffs. So every division in this league had 12 premium subscribers and one of us special contestants. We did a regular season. We took the top 8 teams by total points scored, and they entered the divisional playoffs. Last week was the divisional championships. We now have 4 divisional champions facing off against each other here in round 4 of the playoffs. These are the league playoffs. So we are down to the final 4 to see who is going to win that gorgeous belt that was provided by Arm Championship Belts. Go check out their website, armchampionshipbelts.com. They make amazing custom belts as well as wrestling replica belts. They have some of the best stuff I've seen, which is why I paired up with them. In our first matchup here of the league playoffs, we have Daniel Miner taking on Syracuse Sharks. And in the other game, we have Trevor Newell taking on John McKechnie from RotoWire. He is the one special contestant that is still alive here in these playoffs. Congratulations to all 4 of you guys for being divisional champions, but only one of you can take home the belt. We called it Battle for the Belt for a reason, so let's see who's got what it takes here. Now, giving an update on the Kings Classic League. For those of you watching on YouTube, If you look on the bottom row, the second one over, that is the new one of the new logos here for College Fantasy Reign. The Kings Classic is the elite special invite league that is filled all with college fantasy football analysts. We have analysts from all across the CFF space. This is an amazing group. We have people from Campus to Canton, CFF Lists, the Chasing the Natty podcast, Draft Sharks, Fantasy and Frames, Fantasy Points. I did not have room to put them on here, but also NBC Sports, the Gridiron Scholar, College Fantasy Reign, the Rookie Big Board, RotoWire, the CFF site, and Tom Harvey Sports. And with this league, we had a 6-team playoff happen. The last week, the top two seeds, which was myself and Steve from RotoWire, had a bye, and we're taking on the winners of seeds 3 through 6. And the round 2 matchups here in the Kings Classic has John Lobb from the Gridiron Scholar and Player Profiler. He is taking on myself, Joe Arpazi from College Fantasy Reign. And John and I are longtime friends. We've been in the CFF space for a really long time. My original website, going back to 2008, College Football Geek. John got started in his CFF analyst work as a writer for us. So I'm going to change the graphic and we're going to go old school here. This is going to be a College Football Geek showdown between John Lobb and Joe Arpazi, myself. In our other matchup, we have Matt Hicks from the Rookie Big Board taking on Steve from RotoWire. We are down to the final 4 in this league as well. So I'm going to wish everyone but John good luck this week. John, I plan on trying to advance here, even though you have Caleb Hawkins. So it is going to take everything I've got to knock you out of these playoffs. And now here we are talking about today's podcast show. YouTube and Spotify will be the home of my start-sit suggestions for the week. CollegeFantasyReign.com will be the exclusive home where I answer your submitted questions to help you create the best fantasy lineup. With the submitted question show, I put out a thread on X and on Substack every week asking for your questions. And that is where I go, take them, answer your questions. And we've only got 2 weeks left, guys. It is the playoffs. I want to help you win a championship. So next week, please submit your questions to me, guys. I will have the submitted question show live on YouTube since there will not be any paywall content next week. So even if you are not a premium subscriber, submit your questions. I'm going to be answering them. I'll only answer a total of 10 submitted questions, guys. And while I go through here, for those of you that are new to the show, I will review 3 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 3 receivers, and 2 tight ends. I will go over where I have them in my weekly player rankings. I'll go over the Vegas lines and how many points they expect each team to score for the week. I will also then go through my fantasy matchup grade. What I do is I take team stats offensively and defensively. I assign fantasy points to them, and then I re-rank all the teams based on fantasy points scored or allowed. I then compare those new fantasy rankings to one another, and then my formula kind of works out a grade like you see in school to let you know how good something is. I also go over a handful of other advanced stats, and while I'm going through and reviewing on the show, what I will do is I will tell you whether or not something is very good, average, kind of bad, really bad, because for those of you listening on Spotify, you can't see the graphics that I have on YouTube. But for those of you watching on YouTube, dark green is really good, light green is kind of good, black is average, pink is kind of bad, dark red is really bad. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's dive into some college fantasy football. I'm going to take a sip of water before I jump into these quarterbacks here, guys. I am going to start things off with Jaden Maiava from USC. He is taking on Oregon. I have Jaden Maiava as my QB 49 this week. He's been pushed down a bit. There's some things that give me some trepidation here. Vegas is calling on USC to score 25 points. In my opinion, that's just about average. I say it every week. I like to see for something to be good. The team projected to score 30 points. 28 points would be like a C plus in my eyes. It's right on the border there. And once you start getting in the upper 30s and up, that would be like the A range for how to view these Vegas lines. My fantasy matchup grade came out to a C plus. That is a little bit on the high side of average. One thing I say every week, average is not bad, okay? Average you can have a guy who can still be productive with average. If like all the things I review come out average, they could still be all right. But right now we're in the playoffs. And one of the things that I really look at with the playoffs is you need to be able to count on guys that you put in your lineup. Sometimes you're going to have to make a floor play. You just need safe, guaranteed points. Other times you're willing to take risk for high upside because you feel like you need to. Your opponent has an advantage. Or I mentioned in the Kings Classic, John Lobb has Caleb Hawkins. I could be facing a 30 to 40 point explosion by him like we've been seeing for the last couple weeks. So sometimes you might need to take risk. And that's okay. But those are kind of the two approaches. If there's someone that, that you just aren't really sure about and you don't need to take risk, you don't need to go after bad matchups or just plain average matchups. So jumping back to Mayava, his fantasy matchup grade is average. One thing that I do like for Mayava here is that Oregon gives up touchdowns in the red zone 72.2% of the time. That is very good for this matchup. Everything else is bad here. Oregon gives up only 0.6 passing touchdowns per game. That is kind of bad. And they are only giving up 5.1 yards per pass attempt. That is really bad. I do not think Mayava will be terrible in this one, guys, but I do think he's going to be low. And I don't know how low that floor is. So it's difficult to say, like, hey, you can count on 25 points for Mayava as a safe floor play. I'm not willing to put my stamp on that one. So I'm going to tell people I think the best thing you can do is play it cautious, put Mayava on the bench, wait for his Week 14 matchup with UCLA. So I'm going to say Jaden Mayava, USC, sit him. Next up is one of these risky high ceiling plays. That is Jeff Sims from Arizona State taking on Colorado. I'm kind of going to disagree a little bit here with Vegas. They're calling on Arizona State to score 28 points. That offense has been doing better than that the last two games with Sims at the helm. Colorado is not a stingy defense. When you go through these advanced stats, you'll see why I say that. The fantasy matchup grade that I threw out here and all of the advanced stats I'm going to go through are for rushing. Sims is a big-time runner in this offense. Last week, he had a good improvement in his passing numbers. But I feel like if you're going to have a big explosion day, if you're going to make a ceiling play, yes, him having a good passing day will help. But I think where his real fantasy value is in his legs. So I'm going to go over these rushing matchups. And the fantasy matchup grade for rushing is a B plus in this one. That is pretty good. Two other things that are pretty good here for Sims is that Colorado gives up almost 2 rushing touchdowns per game, and they give up touchdowns in the red zone 61.5% of the time. Something that is excellent for this matchup is that Colorado gives up 5 yards per carry. Just to put things in perspective here, the Oregon offense, the way that I re-rank things by fantasy points allowed, I believe Oregon has the number one fantasy pass defense. They're giving up 5.1 passing yards per attempt. Colorado is giving up 5 yards per rushing attempt. It's amazing that they're that close together. I think Sims should be super productive on the ground here, guys. And because of those things, I ranked him as my QB 10. That's, and I'm going to say, that is very high. But he scored in the 30-point and 40-point range in his 2 starts. And this isn't the type of matchup where you should see regression. I'm not going to say count on 40-point range, but something in the 30-point range I think is a realistic ceiling. But with his legs, and anytime you have a dual threat quarterback, you have that ability that they could just explode some games. So that's the one reason why I did bump him up to 10. And I am going to admit, guys, I think that's an ambitious ranking. But I have taken the risk in one of my leagues and put Sims in my starting lineup, picked him up just for this 1 week, and done that. So I'm going to say Jeff Sims, Arizona State, start him. Lastly, I'm going to cover Nick Minicucci, Delaware. He is taking on Wake Forest. And guys, we know that Wake Forest isn't the strongest Power 4 team, but their defense is kind of legit. I wanted to bring it up because my fantasy matchup grade for this one came out to a B minus, but I don't think Minicucci's performance will live up to that matchup grade. All of these other advanced stats I'm going to go over do not look good for Delaware, their offense, and Minicucci. Vegas is calling on Delaware to only score 17.5 points. So that's just 2 touchdowns, guys. The Wake Forest defense gives up 0.7 passing touchdowns per game. They give up touchdowns in the red zone 46.2% of the time. Those two things are kind of bad. And Wake Forest gives up 5.3 yards per pass attempt. That is really bad. So this is one, guys. I'm going to cover this game from a couple of different angles, but I'm going to say Nick Minicucci, Delaware, sit 'em. I'm going to take a sip of water here before we go into the running backs. All right. My first selection that we're going to review here today is Sean Parker from Utah. He is taking on Kansas State, and Parker was splitting reps early in the year. I wanted to cover him today because he is now starting to get the lion's share of carries. He is looking like that Utah running back of old that all of us that have been around fantasy here for CFF, what we always die to get. So Parker is getting hot, and his workload has grown at just the right time of year. I have him as my running back 6 this week. Vegas thinks Utah is going to score 35 points. And my fantasy matchup grade is an A. So both the Vegas line and my fantasy matchup grade are really good in this one. Kansas State here, there's one pretty good other item that we can look at. That Kansas State gives up 3.9 yards per carry. The rest of the stats here are average, but like I've said, they're not bad. We have 2 average stats paired with 3 good things here. But these average stats, Kansas State gives up just over 1.5 rushing touchdowns per game, and they give up touchdowns in the red zone 52.8% of the time. This is a great matchup, and everything's just aligning, I think, to be really good here. So I have Wayshawn Parker, Utah, start 'em. Excuse me, guys. Next up is Demond Claiborne, Wake Forest, taking on Delaware. I have looked at this one, and last week I had a submitted question asking if Claiborne should be put in the lineup, and to kind of summarize the answer that I gave in that one when I was talking about Claiborne, is I said, he hadn't been very productive for several weeks, and he did have a matchup where he could potentially have good fantasy production, but I recommended sitting him. The reason I recommended it, number one, it was the playoffs, and recent history was showing us that we don't know if we can count on him to give the type of points that you want here in the playoffs. And I said, you'd rather leave him on your bench, wait and see that he can produce again, and then throw him in the lineup here this week. Then put him in there, and he has another 8 fantasy point performance, and you're knocked out of the playoffs. And so here we are now with this great matchup with Delaware. And Vegas is calling on Wake Forest to score 35 points. That is really good. And another really good matchup here is that Delaware is giving up 4.8 yards per carry. We have 2 pretty good things going in this matchup as well. My fantasy matchup grade came out to a B+, and Delaware is giving up 2.2 rushing touchdowns per game. The only average thing that we have to look at this matchup is that Delaware gives up touchdowns in the red zone 57.5% of the time, but I guarantee you that stat will not hold against Wake Forest. So I'm viewing that, even though it comes out as average, I bet you it's going to be up in the 60% range or higher, which would be a good fantasy matchup here. So because of all these reasons, and because we saw Claiborne do it again last week, I rank Claiborne as my running back 11. So to me, this is an obvious one. Demond Claiborne, Wake Forest, start 'em. My last pick here to go over is Dylan Hollywood Smothers from North Carolina. He is taking on Florida State. And Smothers had spent several weeks injured, hadn't played, was questionable last week. He did play some, was not very productive. And it wasn't the best matchup either. You really weren't looking to put Smothers in your lineup there. But now you're thinking, okay, he's had one more week. Maybe he's going to go back to getting that big workload. It's the playoffs, and he's one of my studs that got me here. should I just put him in my lineup and ride my stud? And when you look at my ranking, you're going to think probably not. I ranked Smothers, my running back, 66. And there's kind of a mixed bag of things here, but I'm just in general, guys, I'm just kind of leaning on he has been banged up. He didn't get a big workload. They were splitting it. We don't know if they'll continue that this week. But going into the items that I see is that Vegas is calling on NC State to score 28 points. So average. A couple other average advanced stats here. My fantasy matchup grade is a C, and Florida State gives up 3.3 yards per rush. Well, there's one pretty good matchup here, which is Florida State giving up touchdowns in the red zone 60.7% of the time. The one thing that does scare me a little bit, and it's the only negative thing here, is that Florida State gives up just under one rushing touchdown per game. I worry Florida State's going to jump out to a big lead. The game script won't let NC State hand the ball off 20 times to Smothers. If Smothers is going to get any value in this game, it's going to be probably having to catch the ball. And if you're in a PPR, that might be the only way you could try and cheese some fantasy points out of this matchup. But I don't think there's a good enough floor here that you can count on Smothers. So I'm going to have to say Dylan Smothers, Hollywood Smothers, NC State, sit 'em. Okay, I'm going to take another sip of water before we dive into these wide receivers. Still clearing some bullfrogs here, guys. All right, we are going to start things off with Josh Cameron. Baylor taking on Arizona. And Vegas is calling on Baylor to score 28 points against Arizona. I think that might be right around the money or just a hair above. This Arizona pass defense is legit. We know Baylor's one of the very top they're one of the top ranked fantasy pass offenses when I do my re-rankings. And Cameron had a really good day before, but this Arizona matchup does scare me a bit. So that points allowed of the Vegas line of 28 points, in my opinion, that's kind of like the high end of average. We have one other average matchup stat here, and that is Arizona giving up touchdowns in the red zone 57.1% of the time. We now just have a mixed bag of things. My fantasy matchup grade is a B-. I really kind of view this as a C+ matchup grade. Just as I've watched teams face this Arizona pass defense, they don't have the best of days. So I think this is really more of an average matchup than the way my formula kicked it out. And we have Arizona gives up 0.8 passing touchdowns per game. That's kind of bad. And they give up 5.4 yards per pass attempt. That's really bad. And we've seen Baylor at times will just distribute the ball. Like their workload can change from week to week. And that is another fear I have, that Arizona might be good enough that they can limit Cameron's opportunities to get targets. So out of caution, I think that you need to sit Cameron. At the same time, just if you're handcuffed, if you got a bunch of injuries, because there are a lot of receivers, good fantasy receivers that are dinged up, questionable. If you put them in there, just realize you're going to have a limited ceiling this week. But I'm going to recommend, if you have other options, I'm going to say Josh Cameron, Baylor, sit them. Next up here, I'm going to go over Jacob DeJesus from Cal playing in the game against Stanford. And this is one, guys, I think California is going to do better than Vegas thinks. Vegas thinks Cal's only going to score 26 points. I would not be surprised if they're pushing, like flirting between something like 29-33. I don't do line betting, guys, so please don't take any of this as betting advice. But it's just my gut talking here. I think Cal will be able to move on this Stanford defense, especially through the air. Because of all this, I left this out about Cameron. I have Cameron ranked my wide receiver 53 this week. Switching back to DeJesus. I have DeJesus as my wide receiver 4. Very ambitious, yes. He did not have a great game last week. I'm going to take that back. I think he was on a bye. But we saw that they peppered him with 20 targets a couple weeks ago. I think this is the sort of game that we might see the same sort of thing. Maybe it's 12 to 15 targets. But I love so many things with the advanced stats here. My fantasy matchup grade came out to an A, which is really good. And then two other really pretty good things is that Stanford gives up almost 2 passing touchdowns per game, and they give up almost 8 yards per pass attempt. The only thing really going in Stanford's favor here, in my opinion, is that they give up touchdowns in the red zone 48% of the time. That's kind of bad. But I have a feeling that Cal's probably going to do a little better than that, guys. I think this is a big-time one. If you have him, put him in your lineup. Jacob DeJesus, Cal, start him. My last pick here is Chris Dawn from Texas State. He is taking on Louisiana Monroe, and this is an all-around good matchup, guys. Chris Dawn has wrestled the wide receiver 1 role away in this Texas State offense over the last handful of weeks. He's been really productive, and the combination of how this matchup shapes up and his production over the last 3 weeks made me put Dawn as my wide receiver 9 this week. Vegas likes Texas State to score 37.5 points. That is really good here. We've got 3 pretty good advanced stats. My fantasy matchup grade came out to a B+. One thing I do want to throw out here in this game is that the ground game for Texas State has the better matchup than the passing game. So you could see the ground game maybe get more scoring opportunities, but I think Dawn should still be effective. The last several games have been that way for Texas State. The ground games had the better matchup grades in the passing game, and Dawn's still been able to put up fantasy production. So I just wanted to throw out that little caveat there, but that fantasy matchup grade for passing, B+. Louisiana Monroe gives up 1.9 passing touchdowns per game, and they give up 8 yards per pass attempt. Those are all pretty good matchup things. We have one average stat here. Louisiana Monroe giving up touchdowns in the red zone just a hair under 60% of the time. But I'm liking everything about this matchup, guys. I'm going to say Chris Dawn, Texas State, start him. Before I get into my tight ends and wrap up the show, I'm going to take another sip of water. All right. With tight end, and he's been kind of held and dropped. I don't know what his roster percentage is, but it's 50-50 whether or not he might be out there. I know he's above 30%, so he has not been in my waiver wire articles. But you might, if you need 1 week help, he might be available for you to pick up. That is Benjamin Brahmer from Iowa State. He's taking on Kansas, and Vegas likes Iowa State to score 30 points. This is another game here where you kind of have a lot of average things, but Brahmer's been productive the last 3 weeks. I'm forgetting the name of their tight end too, but he's injured, so Brahmer's getting a bigger workload because of that injury. And so going over just the average things, the fantasy matchup grade is a C. Kansas gives up 1.3 passing touchdowns per game, and they give up 6.8 yards per pass attempt. I do like that Kansas gives up touchdowns in the red zone 60.6% of the time. When you look at this offense, if there's 2 positions that are most likely to benefit from getting red zone scoring opportunities, it's going to be the running back first and foremost, but then the tight end. I'm not going to say Brahmer's definitely going to get a touchdown here, but I do think that he can have a productive day. I think if you're needing help for a 1 week spot start and he happens to be floating out there in your league, or if you have him and you just weren't sure, like you look at a lot of things with this Kansas matchup, you think, oh, it's kind of average. I do think when you look at the injuries that are going on Iowa State, you look at Brahmer's fantasy production over the last 3 weeks, I think he is a good start here. I have him as my tight end 8. So I'm going to say Benjamin Brahmer, Iowa State, start him. Next up, a guy who I was in love with during the middle of the season. I was highly recommending him on the waiver wire articles, but then now we've hit this tough patch of the schedule. That's Sam Roush, Stanford, taking on Cal, once again, covering the big game, but from another perspective. And there's a lot of bad things in this matchup for Stanford going up against the Cal pass defense. For starters, Vegas is calling on Stanford to only score, excuse me, I'm going to take another sip of water. They expect Stanford to only score 23.5 points. That is kind of bad. We've got several other kind of bad things in this matchup. Fantasy matchup grade came out to a D+. Cal only gives up 0.7 passing touchdowns per game, and they give up 6.3 yards per pass attempt. One thing that could help Roush is if Stanford can get down in the red zone. Cal is giving up touchdowns in the red zone 62.5% of the time. But Roush's production hasn't been great lately. This fantasy matchup does not look good. It is a rivalry game, and neither of these two schools are having to travel across the country to play an ACC team. So, Stanford could be fresh. They could surprise everything, like they like to say. Rivalry games throw all the expectations out the window. Anything can happen, but I still am going to recommend, even though Cal's not a great team, there's a lot of bad things with this matchup, passing matchup here. So I'm going to say Sam Roush, Stanford, sit 'em. All right, guys, that was my selections for this week's Start Em, Sit 'em podcast on the brand new College Fantasy Reign podcast. I mentioned earlier, each week I post a thread on X and Substack asking for your start-sit questions. If you want help with your lineup, please join in that discussion and submit your questions to me. And like I mentioned, next week I am giving out all of my content for free. There will be no paywalls. The submitted question show will be done here on YouTube. So if you might have been holding off because you're not a premium subscriber, I'm going to say submit your questions to me, guys. There's not going to be any paywall next week. I will only be taking 10 questions. So throwing that out there to everybody. I'm probably going to look at the combination of people that have been regularly asking questions throughout the year. You guys have been pretty loyal. I'm going to keep making sure I answer your questions, but then also who submits their questions the earliest. I'm also going to be doing that as well. So I want to try and get everything in, guys. And if you're able to make it to the championship game, I want to help you win a championship. So if you want to watch this week's Submitted Question Show, jump over to collegefantasyreign.com where I'll answer those questions. I have a link in the description below for that article. You've been listening to Start 'em, Sit 'em. Please follow on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks for joining the College Fantasy Reign podcast. Your CFF reign starts here.